Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Uninsured Ankles podcast. Joining me this evening, your host, Nick Swanson, is Haley Everett and Jordan Stratton. We may get a surprise drop in from Josh Bartler, so let's stay tuned for that. But, gentlemen, how are we doing? We are at game seven of the NBA Finals, and who would have thought we would go 7 games with OKC and the Pacers?
Yeah, I can't say that I had that one on my bingo card. And obviously, this pod is going to end up being posted after the game finishes being played. So we'll all of our takes that we post here will be scrutinized with the lens of hindsight, which is it's always fun. It's definitely not the series I was expecting, but I don't think my prediction has changed much. I'm still thinking we're going to have a strong finish from OKC, but who knows? Maybe Halliburton's got another game winner in his back pocket.
I mean, I wouldn't have guessed it gone more than 5 games in the first place. But yet the Pacers are here. They want, we get to six, and now we're at seven. Like I'm the same place you are that I think there's no way that OKC loses, but I don't think there's any way I thought OKC went to seven here. I didn't think there's any way the Pacers made it to the final. So I'm gonna pull out a hot take and say Pacers take this, maybe because I spent a few years in Indiana and all that. But geez Louise, like this is not what I would have guessed happening in any way, shape, or form, especially with Halliburton being hurt, Halliburton not even playing that well. What is going on?
Yeah. Yeah, and I can't believe I'm saying this. I said this to the group earlier today or yesterday. I kind of hope the Pacers win tonight. And for the listeners of the pod, I think the first episode we ever put out, I called them the Fakers, and here I am like kind of cheering for them in a game seven, a very uncertain game seven. To you guys' point, like this was not my prediction. Would have not thought that this series would have gone to. Really didn't think it would go past 5 games, and the games haven't been. We've had a couple of decisive games, and then we've had a lot of kind of back and forth games, and I think that that's made this series a lot more interesting than what people maybe like your casual fans would have expected. But as we've talked about here, the Pacers are as good of a matchup for OKC as it gets with their depth and the amount of versatility that they have. So they could pull it out. I genuinely can't believe that I'm going to be actively hoping they win this game.
I would say, despite the fact that they do have depth and they do match up well with OKC, I think we've seen home court hold up pretty well in this series. Um, Obviously, with the caveat being game one, but it's not like OKC had a bad game one and still lost by 1 point on a game winner. Indy lost one game on their home court that was pretty decisive, but most of the Indy role players have not played well in OKC. So
Mhm.
that's one thing that I'd say going into this game. Historically, game sevens are won by the home team in a vast majority of the games. And I think that OKC has a particularly good home court advantage, not just their crowd, but also the Indy role players have not really stepped up when they've been on the road. And then I know there's two other pieces that I've heard talked about a lot, and that is one, Pascal Siakam having the championship experience. And to that point, I expect him to have a good game tonight. But the rest of that team doesn't have a whole lot of championship experience. So trying to paint it like Indy has the experience advantage over OKC doesn't really make sense to me. I mean, OKC's got one championship winner on their roster too, in Alex Caruso. So it's not like it's night and day different on that front. And then the other narrative I've been hearing tossed around is, oh, India has nothing to lose. There's no pressure on them because nobody expected them to be here. And I'm like, this is the freaking NBA Finals. Nobody that's there going into a game seven is thinking about the game seven like, oh, well, I guess, if we lose, at least we were the underdog. Like nobody's thinking about it that way. Everybody's coming in with a ton of pressure, regardless of what, the talking heads might say about who has more pressure or not. Like, there's no doubt that coming out of the game, we're going to talk about the winner differently depending on who it is, but that doesn't mean there's less pressure on the individual players going into it.
Yeah. I think we're in a unique series in that like there's not really any like quote unquote legacy on the line for anybody, really. I mean, I understand SGA had an MVP winning season this year, but that this doesn't change the narrative on any of the players in this like on either team, regardless of the outcome. Not to say not not to say it doesn't have any impact at all, but it's like you're not literally changing the are you a Hall of Famer or not conversation. Because right now all these guys are either really young in their careers or they're like perennial role players. And I think that that in itself kind of gives a lot of the players more freedom. Like, yes, there's going to be a certain level of pressure on all of them, to Jordan's point, but they've been experiencing that throughout the finals already. So, they get here and now it's like, all right, it's like, are you a gamer or not? And I don't know. I think this should be a pretty fun game. I think earlier in the week my hot take was OKC runs away with it, but the more I'm thinking through it, it's like, well, we've got guys who are just they're gonna go out there and like play their buns off. They're not Nobody has anything to lose realistically. Like they're
Yeah.
gonna go out there and try to win. And I don't know. There's a lot of dudes out here with big balls, for lack of a better term. Um, Go ahead, Nick.
As I say, this feels like the NCAA tournament at this point, right? Like
Yeah.
we are at a place where it's one game. It's one game. Sometimes a 16 seed beats a one seed. Sometimes, you get chalk. It's all whatever it is, but it's one game now. It's not a series of seven. We're not talking about, getting through different bunch of different series, bunch of different teams. It's one team versus another team. They play each other six times already. Let's see what happens. It's one game. It's
And to
good.
that point, Jordan's made this point a few times, but these teams are very like collegiate type play styles and like a collegiate style environment. Like it's a lot of next man up. You're all relying on each other. Again, yes, there's some stars on OKC and there's some stars on the Pacers, but every game somebody's stepping up into kind of a role that's typically not of themselves to make a difference. And yeah, I think this game could be pretty fun in that sense.
One note that I'll make to your point from a minute or so ago, Haley, about legacies not being on the line. I think the only person that really has a potential to have this be a Hall of Fame make or break game is Rick Carlisle,
Mm,
um, because this would be the second championship on his resume, correct? Uh, and so he would be getting into the conversation of there aren't that many coaches that are winning multiples, and yeah, he could propel himself into that conversation. Well, he would be in the conversation. I think it'd be hard to keep him out if they won it.
The counter to this though is how much is Rick Carlisle going to affect on this specific game?
Maybe
Right?
on
He's built the team, he's coached them like they're going to do what they're going to do.
I don't think it's not necessarily like how well he could he could completely outcoach uh Dagnall and in this game and have that be the thing that changes the tide. But the point is more, he got them to be in this point. No one expected them to be here. They do not have the roster that we think of when we think of a championship winning team.
hmm
Like if they won, I was watching a video today or a couple days ago about if we say that either Pascal Siakam or Tyrese Halliburton are the best player on uh, the Pacers, that would be the worst best player to win an NBA Finals since probably the 2004 Detroit Pistons. And even that would be like up for discussion whether or not we want to say that Chauncey was better than those two guys.
Yeah.
Because
And they also
because you could make the argument that Chauncey was better than one of those two guys. And so if he is, we're going back to like the mid 90s before there's a player that's worse than Halliburton or Siakam.
Mid 90s? we got Bulls and we got Rockets, right? Like who is that we're taking out of there between Jordan and Hakeem Olajuwon?
I'm just
Yeah.
saying that that's you're probably going to like
No, I'm agreeing with you. It goes way
yeah,
back.
it's probably even
Yeah.
further. We might be going to yeah, honestly, I can't even think of who it might be. If now that we're going back through, like it's not going to be any of the 80s Lakers, 80s Celtics
Celtics.
guys.
Yeah.
I'm taking Isaiah Thomas over either one of those guys.
Yeah.
If it's those
You're talking legit
teams,
Hall of Famers. Yeah.
like
So
the and we have to attribute the fact that a team like this Pacers team made it to this point to their coaching.
so is this the
Yeah.
biggest upset if they win this year? Like the biggest like upset like biggest surprise. Like I think about like the Mavs beating the Heat in the finals with Dirk. Like that was a pretty big upset. I think about even the Raptors from a few years ago. Like I know they had Kawhi, but I didn't
Yeah.
think all that much of it. Is this the biggest upset ever? Go ahead, Haley.
Yeah. I mean, I think there are some caveats to the Raptors beating the Warriors because they had multiple season-ending injuries to key players. So we can kind of put an asterisk on that one. But the not an asterisk on their championship, but as far as the upset, it makes it a little less of a
Right.
gap. But the that '04 Pistons team beating the Lakers that year was pretty surprising. Like I
Yeah.
that was also on the tail end of a three-peat, so it's like I don't know. You kind of expect a loss at some point, and that's kind of a crazy thought, but I don't know. Shaq was not in his best shape that particular year, so I don't know. And that Pistons team had multiple all defensive NBA players, had an all NBA player. So that was a pretty ridiculous team. Um, and
Yeah,
then
I would say
the,
the 2011
yeah,
Mavs team is in my opinion uh the greatest upset of all time just because of all the expectations that surrounded that Miami Heat team. Um, it's not to say that when you just compare side by side team makeups that was clearly the biggest gap in skill. Like that's not the case, but I think with how that Heat team had been hyped up, that's probably the biggest in my mind. But this would be right up there with it. I mean, there are single digit teams that have won as many regular season games as OKC has. They've been by far and away the best team all season with the best defense and a top 5 or 6 offense. So it's pretty crazy that we're at this point, especially with them staying healthy. Like
yeah,
they've had all their dudes. So
Mhm.
yeah, it would be a crazy upset for sure, and one that's I mean it's going to bolster all of their resumes, but it would be a huge one for the coaching resume.
So while we're talking legacies and all this stuff, I can't help but think about this will be OKC's first championship as a program, right? As an entity. Even when they moved from Seattle, they didn't bring championships with them, right? That is a little bit bonkers to me that this would be the team that would get it, right? We think about the KD, Harden, Russ didn't get it done. We think about, Sean Kemp, Detlef Schrempf, Gary Payton teams. Like those teams didn't get it done. They were conference finals, each of them at least once. They ran to another team that lost, but like I can't. Like, is SGA that good? Like, is this team that good? Like, I can't wrap my head around those teams being iconic in my mind through the '90s and then 10 years ago. And this is the team from that franchise that gets it done. Like, what's kind of going on there? Like, I can't wrap my head around it, I guess.
yeah. I mean, historical context, like this Thunder team is one of the best handful of teams like we've seen in our lifetimes. Uh, and I know some of that's like you put it into advanced statistics and their net ratings and things like that are off the charts good. Their defense is one of the best ever. Their
Ever.
offense is also ridiculously high efficiency. And yeah, I mean, we're before the season, it was the Thunder or the Celtics. That was who you were choosing to win the championship. And, the Thunder looked like world beaters all year. And I mean, y'all know what happened with the Celtics, but yeah, I think that this is this was the team we thought they were. I mean, Jordan had them as his preseason champion. Uh, so it's like top to bottom, they're one of the most well constructed teams that I think we'll see in a long, long time.
Yeah, I think the note I would add there is we were just talking about how crazy defensively the '04 Pistons were. This
Hmm.
this team to me feels like if you put a 30 point per game star on the '04 Pistons. And if we look at what those Pistons teams did in the early 2000s, they won a championship, they made another finals, they were
Hmm.
perennial late postseason contenders. I think that's what we're going to see at least for the next couple of years out of OKC. I'm worried about with the new CBA and how much they're going to have to pay guys, especially guys like J Dub after he made an All NBA team this year and is going to garner a little bit extra cash at his next extension. I do have concerns about their ability to keep this team together. Yeah, Chet's still on a rookie contract. J Dub's on a rookie contract. Wiggins is still on a super cheap contract. Casey Wallace is on a cheap contract. Caruso's is kind of mid level, but also he's kind of carried them through pieces of this playoffs and is
Hmm.
probably going to expect a bigger contract. So, while their draft capital is going to keep them contending if they hit on some guys, they're not going to be able to keep this team together. So I hope that they're able to capitalize in the next couple of years before they have to shell out a ton of money.
Yeah. Jazz rap aficionado Sam Presti. I think he'll be able to find a way to kind of extend the longevity of the whatever the core ends up being. But yeah, to your point, it's not going to look exactly the same from beyond 2 or 3 years at most.
It
I'm
is it
looking at
is good that I think they've got J-Dub tied up for at least another year or two on his rookie deal. Chet's got a year or two on his rookie deal. Hartenstein's got a year or two on the deal that he just signed. SGA's got a year or two on his deal left. So that core at least has a couple years left before we really have to start having that conversation. But also their draft capital is enough that they're going to have to start taking hard looks at some of their bench guys
Hmm.
that have been major contributors.
Yeah, Jalen Williams is a steal right now. I'm looking at their salaries. I think they move Hartenstein in the next year or so, just because he's the second highest paid player on this team. And I don't want to say he's duplicative, but you've got bigs otherwise that you can play and don't need him after this. Um, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they evolve, especially with all their draft capital.
Hmm.
Well, that might be a
Um,
good transition to our next segment as the NBA draft approaches. I want to take a look at some of the goings ons and where guys might end up, who we think might be trading their draft capital, etc. I know you boys are well researched on this topic. So maybe I will take Nick's seat as the moderator for this particular segment and let y'all go to town.
I love
Nick,
it.
Nick, what do you got for us to lead us off in this draft discussion?
so I don't think we should even talk about the number one or number two pick because those feel locked in, right? I could see the Spurs potentially trading it, but you're basically trading Dylan Harper at this stage. So for
Hmm.
me, I'm locked in at number three and number four with Edgecombe and Trey Johnson. I think they're both fantastic. I think they're both going to be all stars. I think they're going to be, all the things they can be. I mean, if they're not all stars, they're kind of like third guy on the roster, really elevating it like top end guys. Um, but after that, like there's a lot of question marks that I'm excited to see where they go. I'm excited to see, where Con Knippel goes. Like with your guy, Jordan, I know you've been really high on him for a while, and I'm kind of drinking the Kool-Aid too. And there's a lot of smoke with him going to OKC, which is what, four. So that I'm kind of at a tension right there with, or not OKC, excuse me, Charlotte.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
uh, too much OKC talk. But I don't know how that comes out, right? Like if Trey goes three, I think there could be something that with Edgecombe falling. But I think if Edgecombe goes first, you could easily see or third overall before Trey Johnson. I think Trey Johnson gets taken over Knipple and then kind of just things fall out. But I can see Knipple falling even after that. So I'm really excited. I think there's so many fun dynamics kind of going through all this that gets me all giddy inside.
Yeah.
Um, I gave a bunch of hot takes in our group thread, but yeah, I would love to hear some of Haley's hot takes coming into this.
Oof. I think maybe this isn't necessarily the hottest of takes, but one of my hot takes is you've got a lot of very versatile, skilled bigs, and I think that most of them just aren't going to be that good. Uh, whether it's Derek Queen, Danny Wolf, Hanson Yang. I know we talked about Hanson Yang a decent little bit on our last pod, but you've got a lot more bigs who, Maxime Reynaud is another one who's getting a lot of buzz. These like 7 footers, 6'10" to 7 foot guys who can pass, dribble, shoot, but they're all lacking at the very least some defensive versatility, and they project to be pretty bad on that end of the floor. And I think the one thing that I've taken note of over the past couple months with a lot of these two big lineups, the reason that they work is because both bigs are really solid defensively, at least to an extent where they have switchability or they're really elite rim protectors or some combination of those things. Like Adam and Shingun, I know Shingun used to get hate for not being a good defender, but he's like
He's
actually
solid.
a really good defender.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, Chet and Isaiah Hartenstein, also like
Both fairly
they're
switchable.
yes, and you don't have to live in drop coverage with both or either of them on the floor. You can like allow them to switch if you need to onto the perimeter. Queen, you cannot do that right now. His feet are just not quick enough. He doesn't show the effort or the motor on that end. And I think, you know, I th when we first ended the tournament, Queen was being projected top five, top seven. Now he's falling somewhere like late lottery, sometimes later in certain mocks, which is it's surprising because he had such hype for a period of time. But anyways, that's kind of my short version of a semi hot take. I also see Danny Wolf like really high on certain boards, and when you hear like talent evaluators talk about him, they're like, yes, he's super skilled. The shot's not there. He can't play defense. He's a huge three that's slow. And I'm like, that's not a guy I want personally.
Not a guy I want. I mean, I wanted him in Michigan. I loved him in Michigan, but in the NBA, I don't want him. And I think Josh has hit this head on the nail, this nail a few times, which is everybody's trying to recreate the hot thing. Jokic is the best player
Mm-hmm.
in the world. They're trying to recreate some version of Jokic. I think the thing that everybody forgets is Jokic's best asset is his head. And he's so smart. He has such a high basketball IQ that like that's what makes him function that high. And so if you're doing a bunch of turnovers in college with Danny Wolf, what makes you think you're not going to do that with bigger, longer, more athletic people in the NBA? You know,
Yeah.
if you're just barely athletic enough in college and Derek Queen, what makes you think you're going to be even more athletic and be able to make it all work in the pros? Like, it's not, you know, Josh also says fast is slow and slow is fast, right? But this is one of those things where I don't think their heads are always to the speed that Jokic is like 5 steps ahead of everybody always on the court. And they just can't make up for that difference. Even if they pass well, shoot well, can dribble and do all those things.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
just to touch on the point a little bit where like we've said, too many guys are getting compared to Joker, wanting to have be able to find the next Joker. When we're looking at someone like Derek Queen, I much sooner see him becoming the next big Jalen Williams on OKC than I do see him be the next Joker. Somebody that's skilled, plays decent defense, has all the offensive tools, but like is barely cracking the rotation in their lineup in the last two series. Um, had some meaningful minutes throughout the season and stepped up big when they had some some minor injuries, but is not someone that's gonna, be a perennial all-star type player.
I think what it boils down to me is where do you see these guys on your roster? Kind of what you're saying there, Jordan. You see back end of the roster sub. That's not what I want to be taking in the first round. I want to take a guy that I feasibly see as a starter. And I think someone like Connor, I don't see him as an all-star necessarily, but I think he's a solid starter. You see every bit of him being a starter on your team. And if you're middle of the draft, let's go. Let's just get that floor and let's get in there and elevate a position of need.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
To to that end, I think that this class has one of the like largest clusters of prospects that I've seen. I mean, in a really long time, at least. I've consumed a lot more NBA draft content this year than I have in the past, so it's like hard to contextualize. But I think after probably 6, 7, kind of the guys we were talking about earlier, Knipple, Trey Johnson, VJ, and I'll throw Ace in that group too, but and then obviously the top two. But after that group, there's maybe 2 or 3 guys who I think are kind of distinguished as high upside dudes. Malawach, who we talked about extensively. Queen, I think, does have high upside, but it's still his floor is like pretty rough, in my opinion. Anyways, all that to say, you've got a huge group of people who are kind of like uh 8 to 12th man type dudes from basically 10 to 70, like something like that. Like realistically, it's a really big group of people that there's not huge gaps in their kind of outcomes there. And not to say that there's not people who are higher level swings and lower floors, but you've got like bigger risk with those guys and most of them project out to be somewhere in the middle and role players. Versatility of players has come a long way. We're not looking at nearly as many specialists as I think we had when maybe we were growing up. And it's just really interesting, I think, to see the way that skills have been developed by guys. And like it's just so many different types of prospects this draft that I'm really excited about. And just seeing what they turn into. And, for nerds like us, we're like, oh yeah, that guy can be an eighth man, and that would be a meaningful eighth man. Like we get
Yeah,
excited about that. But like for most folks, you're saying, oh, my 13th pick for the Hawks, like my 13th pick, I want them to be a starter next year. It's like, no, no, that's realistically not the way rookies work out. So, you
not
know,
anymore. It's too deep.
yeah,
So one other guy I want to make sure we talked about before we get into the draft is Walter Clayton Jr. I don't know if you all kind of followed him in the NCAA tournament, but he's a dude. He's an absolute dude. And I've seen him start climbing up some mock drafts. And I want to see what you guys think of Walter Clayton Jr., especially in the context of what Haley just said around, we're looking for eighth guys on the bench sometimes when we're midway through the first. We're not looking for starters. Like what do you guys think of Walter Clayton Jr.?
I have some concerns about him being a plug-in starter guy. I think we talked about this a little bit before. People were saying he was going to be the next coming of Steph Curry. Like that was the hot topic when they were making their run to the finals. And that was not my feeling. I know I mentioned that I saw him much more as like a Jamal Murray type player, same rough build, same kind of offensive style where it's a lot of, DHOs, on ball screens to try to either get downhill or get pull up jumpers. That's the kind of player I could see him being, but the way that the rookies have been able to get into playing time, at least the last couple years, doesn't seem conducive to developing that kind of player because he would need the ball in his hands a lot. So
mm,
unless he's getting drafted to a team that has no good starting guards, which is possible, there are a lot of teams that could use a good scoring guard. But unless he finds himself in one of those circumstances, I don't see him as a fantastic bench player because he's not like a J.R. Smith style, microwave type of player, but he's also not a slow down your offense, super ball control, super high assist to turnover ratio type of backup guard. So I don't know exactly where he fits. He might be someone that just absolutely murders it in the G League for a couple of years and then is able to find his way into some additional minutes, or somebody that he could be someone that takes advantage of an injury to a starting guard and he's able to plug and play. But if he goes to a team that's got a established guard rotation, I don't think it's going to be something that he's a particularly good fit for. And I think most teams will be aware of that too. So I expect him to go to someone with some guard need, but I don't see him being a first year, you know, making waves type of player.
Mm-mm. Yeah, I'm with Jordan on that. I agree that he's kind of a tough fit in general for his player type. And then he, as far as like finding a good role for him, scoring guards being that small and not being super efficient, not just like for themselves scoring, but being able to create and run an offense like that. It's not necessarily his forte. He wasn't like a high IQ decision maker. He's more of like big time shot maker. He was the majority of like that offense, and I think yeah, he's not somebody I that's super high on my personal board. But there is to your point always a place for somebody who can get buckets. Like uh, somebody always needs somebody who can heat up off the bench, but he's not your traditional microwave type. He's not your Jamal Crawford, Lou Williams, J.R. Smith. He doesn't really fit your traditional six man scoring guard type of role. And he's got point guard size, which I think is the other
Right.
concerning part. I know he answered some defensive questions in the tournament, like when they were trying to attack him in the final couple of games. He really kind of held his own, but I do think that will continue to be a concern because he's just not that big. So they'll be able to generate some pretty high leverage matchups with a guy like that on the
So
floor.
here's my comp that I was thinking through is Marcus Sasser. Like, is that reasonable?
Yeah, that is a good comp.
Like, I mean, you got to have a young team. You got to have a role. And like some days Marcus Sasser goes for 22 points, and other days he'll go for 2 points. And that's
Well,
kind of he knows it's a certain day and time thing.
and some days Marcus Sasser has 0 minutes, coach's
Yeah.
decision. So yeah,
Right.
I that's a I like that comp. Marcus Sasser's also young enough to where he's like they're trying to test him out, and he's gotten put into roles that are certainly outside of his uh
Comfort zone.
scope. Yeah. But he's turned up from time to time, but he's also like shown that he's still got some gaps to really be like a full-time, even a full-time role player. But he's got a place on a bench somewhere.
Which is tough to say, but also is realistic and indicative of the depth of the NBA right now. Please
Hmm.
give us expansion teams. But kind of going feeding off of that, the depth of the NBA, and also um, the what Haley you were just talking about the density of this draft, where we've got a few clear cuts that are in the top, 10-ish picks, and then a lot of really solid guys with a decent amount of upside that goes even into like the second round of the draft. Like we could have plenty of second round hits. What do you guys think about the increasing value of second round picks going into future years as the draft inevitably gets more and more deep?
Yeah. There's such a like there's so many layers to the value to those picks now because they're affordable roster spots. You can turn them into two ways pretty quickly. You can stash a guy who's a project guy. There's just like you have a lot more flexibility with a second round player than you do with I mean almost any player that you can imagine. And that gives you an opportunity to develop them in your system if you send them to your G League affiliate, or you stash them overseas and you still have their rights while they're continuing to develop in a professional setting, which is like better than, hoping for that prospect that you've had your eye on that you've been scouting for 3, 4 years. And here they are, they decided to go back because their NIL deal at, you know, UAB is $15 million or whatever. But
When was the
yeah,
last time we had somebody stashed overseas that worked out?
Mark Gasol.
Fair. Okay. I don't know those. Like
Which
I
has
know
been
that
a
UAB
hot
had somebody.
minute.
Yeah, it's been a hot minute. I
Uh,
don't recall many overseas guys being stashed and then like they come over and it's like, oh yeah, this dude is a dude. When either they come over and they're good or they never.
Emmanuel Mudiay. No, but he wasn't
yeah,
even
and
stashed. He just played some overseas ball.
That's fair.
yeah, I don't, that's a good point, Nick. I don't actually know what the like most of the outcomes for those guys. But to the point that like we have to remember like in context, they're second rounders. So there's very low like
Risk.
it's yeah, low risk. You're not investing a lot into that. And then if you get somebody for 2 or 3 years, they're still on a very cheap contract. And the if I understand the way that the contracts work, when you bring them on, they basically get the equivalent to that contract. So whatever your second round 52nd pick contract is, you bring them on at that rate because you had their draft rights rather than signing them as a free agent or something to that extent. So it's the contract still becomes it's cost effective for somebody who might sit on the end of your bench or might maybe your 12th man, something like that. So
So to me, the second rounds are basically rolls and dice, right? You're getting hopefully some bench players on the cheap later because we were just talking about OKC having money issues later when everybody comes into their rights and you got to start filling bench spots. You don't want to do it expensively, so you start throwing your maybe one of your new 5 second round picks hands out, right? Like that's basically what we're seeing here is we're not counting on anything, but it's found cheap talent potentially in the future.
Yeah, and I guess that's kind of what I was going towards is my thinking is in light of the conversation we had last time around guys like Evan Turner now being more valuable to a team than an Evan Mobley purely because of we know exactly what we're going to get on the court from both of those guys, but the fact that you're going to save like $30 million a year with Evan Turner versus Mobley,
Mi- Miles.
Miles Turner.
or that's what I meant. What did I say? Did I say
Evan
Evan.
Turner.
Evan?
Yeah.
Well, Miles Turner. Um, my my thinking is going that same direction for the draft because, like Haley said, there appears to be such a massive swath of players that are feeling like kind of toss-ups with a ton of upside. Like I'd say there's probably 30 of them that you could probably put into that bucket, which means that we've got to have at least 10 or 15 that are dropping into the second round that you could make an argument are worth a look in the first round, or at least
hmm
are an argument for that they're a better prospect than somebody that's going to get taken in the first round. So, given that their contract is going to be worth like half as much as your first rounder is, and there's a little bit more flexibility with what you can do with them, is a second rounder in the deep or 2 second rounders in the now very deep draft going to end up being more valuable than your mid first round pick going forward? And I'll leave that one up in the air as we point towards the amazing trade that just went down today in sending Kevin Durant to the Houston Rockets for bum and 5 second round picks. Is this less of an absolute fleece than we think it is because of how deep the draft has become and we anticipate it being going forward?
So to me, this is the ultimate question of are second rounders that more valuable than we think, or is KD worth less than we think? Go ahead.
Maybe it's both. Both things can be true. Um, that's where I mean the other part of this is like I don't think this is done, and there's been a lot of talk that like you just cannot have Jalen Green, Bradley Beal, and Devin Booker all on the same team. So the return's not full, like it's not complete at this point. And don't get me started on the whole like Sam Presti turned Paul George into whatever, like 7 years later. But in the immediate future, that it's pretty unlikely that all of these shooting guards using that wings that like play relatively the same position stay. So the return's not complete for us to like really put that into full scope. But as far as the draft capital goes, sorry, a small tangent. As far as the draft capital goes, I there's already been some precedents with like a lot of second round picks getting moved. And, I think maybe from an outsider perspective, when it first started happening, it looked like they were just getting thrown in as
Mhm.
add-ons, and now it's a trend, and you're like, oh, okay, this is like teams are valuing the second round picks
Yep.
for, I mean, for the reasons we just laid out. There's so many layers to it. And yes, it's a crapshoot, but it's it's a better investment than nothing at all, right? Like the alternative is nothing or cash. Like
There's been a lot of talk about Green already being on his way out, and he's not gonna not even get on a flight to Phoenix type thing.
buy the jersey now.
Yeah.
It's great you're on Haley. Um, but also we can't overlook the fact that the two of the three main players that were supposed to be the trifecta in Phoenix before were shooting guards. Like this isn't like we have this established precedence of like, oh, we need to manage a roster well. No, Bradley Beal, Devin Booker should have been two of the three best players on that roster, and they're both the two most shooting guards in the NBA. Like,
They are. When you think shooting
Yeah.
guard, the picture that should come up should be Devin Booker and then a secondary picture of Bradley Beal.
yeah. So
Yes.
with a positional designation that's I think very quickly going away,
Yeah.
like
Hmm.
you have two of them. And now you have three or four of them, with Grayson Allen being a very good shooting guard as well. So
Yeah. I think more will come to light in the next week, and I think we'll save a full breakdown of how this trade shakes out for our next pod as we dive a little bit more into what free agency and what the market looks like um, going into the off season. But quick hit on the Houston Rockets because we just we can slam the Suns and that's worth noting, but also quick hit on the new Houston Rockets with Kevin Durant in their lineup. For me, Kevin Durant's getting old, but also he's aged very well. We haven't seen a super steep drop off. I think you can still rely on him to get you 20 points, even if he's not doing a ton else on the floor. And that's kind of what this team needed is a consistent 20-point scorer. It was kind of hard to say who was going to show up on a given night. And now you're going to have KD putting up 20 a night for you, which is huge. And I'm curious to see what this means for um, guys like Tari Eason because somebody's going to need to step up to fill Dylan Brooks's minutes, and as that additional defensive stopper beside next to Thompson, and I think that's going to be Eason, and I hope that we see him take some major strides forward in the next season.
Yeah.
I think he will, yeah.
Um, yeah.
Good.
I'm 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 pretty excited about the just kind of the makeup. I think they're probably still shy a elite facilitator, but like they do have Shingun and Fred who I think do will get them by. Like they both know how to run an offense and are professionals at that. So not essential, but to your point as far as like defensive stoppers go, you still got Whitmore who's mostly been riding the bench, but he's has the reputation of like potentially turning into kind of that like Case and Wallace type of perimeter defender, big, strong, and
Also
fat.
still has a ton of offensive upside. He was supposed to
Yeah,
be a lottery guy or a top
yeah,
five pick before we had all the drama around him leading up to the draft a couple years ago. So
yeah,
he could still be a dude.
yeah. I think we're all
Absolutely.
like, at least the three of us. I don't know about Josh, but I think we're all pretty firmly on like Cam Whitmore Island. Uh,
Yeah.
Plenty of stock in Mr. Whitmore, but yeah, like Tari's, as long as he can just stay healthy, I think that he's already proven to be one of the most nightmarish defenders. Like, and him and Amin next to each other, just ridiculous. And then there's Jabari Smith Jr. as like a sidekick to these guys, who I think he was really starting to break out a little more towards the end of the year. I think that KD probably honestly like can supplement him to allow him to operate in a little more space where you've got somebody that you have to stay glued to at all times, whereas Jalen was so inconsistent that, if he's cold enough, you don't have to worry about it anymore.
Yeah.
And with KD, that's not a thing. Like he's never that cold.
No.
Um, so it's gonna be, I think it'll be a fun team. And then they still have Reed Shepherd, who, when he actually played in the league, like was
Hooped.
doing things. Yeah, like
He was a
it's gonna
50-40-90 guy in his like
be
20 minutes.
He's going to be a dude still in my mind. I'm very excited about him. And I think all we're talking about here is this young core of guys that, we talked about this halfway through the season. We were talking about all-star breaks, right? I think
hmm
Houston had the second best record in the West.
Yep.
I might be getting that wrong, but
No,
they
that's
were
right.
up
Right
there.
around there, yeah.
But who is their best player? I wasn't sure. We all know who the best player on the floor is now. You have a Hall of Famer in Kevin Durant. He's an old head. You got Fred VanVleet to help kind of lead with him too. But you've got 20 points a game. You've got an alpha 1A player. Everything else fills in after that. They're a young team. I think this works so well and gives so many opportunities to the young guys to kind of fight it out amongst themselves and figure out who's in which position. But there's enough talent and depth here to really make some noise. And I'm very high on them.
I think that at the very least they'll be a fun team.
Mhm.
And I think a little more fan friendly than the combination of Jalen Green and Dylan Brooks, who just can be pretty
Life sucks.
volatile players. Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, should we see the rest of this conversation of what's transpiring in the off season to next week when we get Josh in here to give his takes as well?
I think
That
that's a
sounds
great
good.
call.
All right. Well, everybody, thanks for joining us for another episode. Keep your ankles laced up tight and your friend groups even tighter.